So, the latest climate change protests have seen hundreds of arrests. Some activists say it's worth it to highlight a global emergency. We've been meeting the pensioners, putting themselves on the front line.
Okay. What are you going to say in court? Yeah, why not?
Give it a go.
I can't believe I'm here. I shouldn't be in court. I'm a law-abiding citizen.
Erica Curran is about to go to court for the first time. She's practicing her defence.
But to be stood here as a potential criminal and to be called a prisoner by my arresting officers, I find very, very surreal.
I first met Erica back in April during the first round of climate change protests in London.
What's your shift?
I'll be here till 1 o'clock in the morning.
Are you looking forward to that?
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
As protests go, on Waterloo Bridge it was all very polite. Alongside Erica were a distinct number of older people, many from the southwest.
So this is the real Cornish contingent on this side of the bridge, really, isn't it?
Yes, it was our job to take this side of the bridge.
We are just trying to draw attention to the climate emergency and to climate justice, and we wanted to do it in a very peaceful way, and I love knitting, so I thought I'd bring my knitting with me and my chair.
Many people here were first-time protesters, and the police were taking a softly approach.
It's a lovely feeling here. You don't get the impression that anybody's going to get arrested. It's more like a nice day out.
But it's the prospect of what the next generation may face that spurred many to come here. Scientists say there's a risk of global temperatures exceeding internationally agreed targets and that urgent action is needed. Erica is among thousands who believe getting arrested will put pressure on the government to do more.
I'm expected to be arrested. I can't bear thinking of my grandchildren living in an era when civilization might start breaking down, which David Attenborough has warned us about. And let's face it, I adore the man.
And she was arrested twice, along with more than 1,000 other people. Now, nearly 6 months later, she faces a charge under a public order offence. She's pleaded not guilty, saying her actions were out of necessity.
I feel I have no alternative. I'm compelled because I intend to look my grandchildren in the eye on my deathbed and tell them I did all in my limited power to stop this dreadful crisis.
And do you think that defence will get you off?
I'm not convinced, Gemma. I'm not convinced. But it is what my heart says.
Today, Erica is going to meet 2 fellow protesters in Penzance. They've also been charged and pleaded not guilty.
How can you afford to keep doing this? Aren't you going to get into trouble financially?
I'm not made of money. I work in a market. I earn minimum wage. I simply haven't got a huge amount of money. But what I will do is dip into my savings. If the money runs out and I can't pay, is that the point where I go to prison? I don't know.
Is that what you're prepared to do?
I am prepared to go to prison.
This month, London has seen more mass protests. The police are now seeking tougher public order laws to crack down on climate change demonstrations.
Hello. Here. Hi.
How are you? Good to see you. Good to see you.
Jan Power is a GP in her 60s. Remember, we met her earlier on Waterloo Bridge. She never did finish knitting that blanket, but she did get arrested, like Erica, only after 5 days of trying.
They didn't want older women. At one point, a load of greyer-haired women sat right on the front line and they were walking around us.
Mark, Jan's husband, also a GP, and their friend, Dom Gertz, were arrested right at the start of the protests.
This police officer, Mark, is it?
Sam.
Sam, sorry.
Yes,
Sam is going to be affected by climate change.
too.
Do you think you've wasted Sam's time, though, with all the police resources that have gone into this?
I'm trying to save Sam's life in the same way that I'm trying to save the planet and everybody, and my own life. You know?
Jan and Erica believe the police were reluctant to arrest them.
I just don't think they wanted our demographic.
Were they actually walking around me because of my white hair, because I was an elder, and because it would gain too much public sympathy to see too many of us evidently older people being carted off?
Most of those here are part of a campaign called Extinction Rebellion, known as XR. It advocates non-violent civil disobedience, which has gathered huge support across all ages, from celebrities to politicians. But there are critics, including one politically right-of-centre think tank, which brands XR extreme and anti-capitalist.
It's impossible to separate their environmental beliefs from their radical anti-capitalist and actually in some ways quite anti-democratic beliefs as well.
Gail Bradbrook, one of the co-founders of XR, who was recently arrested after smashing a window at the Department of Transport, denies that.
Words like extreme and extremist and radicals and all this type of thing, they're a way of separating Extinction Rebellion out from the rest of the population. You know, Extinction Rebellion's full of grandparents, doctors, lawyers, scientists, ordinary people, you know, plumbers, ex-police officers. It's not extremist, radical, whatever. You know, there are people that have looked at the science and care deeply.
It's surprising that Extinction Rebellion has managed to persuade such a large number of people, many of them from ordinary backgrounds, to join what are essentially radical professional protesters in being willing to get arrested. That in many ways is quite new, and I think that it's a sign of how an extreme and quite apocalyptic message can be successful at radicalising otherwise ordinary people.
Policy Exchange refuses to say who funded the research into XR.
Are you trying to break up the state? Is that part of it?
No.
Do you realise that that's what you're part of?
I'm an environmental scientist by training. I've been reading about this for decades. There are three demands of Extinction Rebellion, and the third demand is that we use citizens' assemblies to make difficult political decisions. It is absolutely not about breaking up the state.
Are you all naive and have been led into something that you don't understand the implications of?
I totally disagree. I think that's an extremely patronising description of us all.
So freedom of assembly, just like that guy.
But getting a criminal conviction for a public order offence carries risks. It could make getting certain jobs more difficult, for example. This is where Erica and Jan believe their age helps.
I don't fear all the future things like getting mortgages, getting insurances, all the sorts of things that people just starting their lives are aspiring to. I've been there, I've done it. So I feel that my age is enabling me to literally do this for everybody else in that sense of taking one for the team, if you like.
We are the secret weapon, and I feel as an older person it's my duty to do it. I would, if necessary, go to prison.
You would?
Yeah.
It hasn't come to that yet. Erica had her day in court. She got a 9-month conditional discharge and a fine of nearly £400. Dom and Jan are yet to appear in court, but both were arrested again. Jan has a month-long ban from parts of London. All three of them say they plan to keep on protesting.